am 26 years old. My fiancé, Liam, is the man I thought I would spend my life with. His parents, however, had other plans. It started on a Tuesday, a day that felt ordinary until the moment it wasn't. We were at their house for dinner, a weekly ritual that always left me feeling like I was being interviewed for a job I already had. Richard and Eleanor, Liam's parents, sat across from me at their polished mahogany dining table. The air was thick with the scent of roasted chicken and unspoken judgment. Liam was sitting next to me, his hand resting on my knee. It was meant to be a comforting gesture, but it felt heavy, like a paperweight holding down a stack of my own anxieties. He had been quiet all evening, which was unusual for him. Normally, he filled the silences with easy chatter, bridging the gap between his parents' formal energy and my own more relaxed nature. Tonight, he just squeezed my knee every so often, his eyes darting between his mother and me. Dinner ended. Eleanor cleared her throat, a small bird-like sound that always preceded a declaration. "Clara, dear," she began, her voice smooth and cool. "Richard and I need to discuss something with you and Liam, a matter of some importance regarding the wedding." I looked at Liam. He gave me a weak, almost imperceptible shake of his head, as if telling me not to worry. But I was already worried. The tone in his mother's voice was the same one she used when she pointed out a slight imperfection in the caterer's proposal or a potential issue with my choice of flowers. Richard leaned forward, placing his folded hands on the table. He was a man who took up space, both physically and emotionally. His presence was a weight in any room. "Clara, our family has worked very hard for several generations," he said, his voice a low rumble. "We have built something substantial, something that requires protection." I nodded slowly, unsure where this was going. "Of course," I said. "I respect that very much." Eleanor smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Those eyes, a pale, calculating blue, stayed fixed on me. "We are so pleased that Liam has found you," she continued. "But love, as you know, can sometimes be blinding. Practicalities must be considered." It was then that Richard reached into his suit jacket. He pulled out a thick folded document bound by a clip. He slid it across the table toward me. It stopped just short of my water glass. My heart started to beat a little faster. I knew what it was before I even read the first word: a prenuptial agreement. "We've had our lawyers draft this," Richard said, his tone matter of fact. "It's standard procedure for our family. It ensures that everyone is protected." I stared at the document. The crisp white paper seemed to mock me. Protected? That wasn't what this felt like. This felt like an accusation. I looked at Liam again, my eyes pleading with him to say something, to stop this. He just stared at the document, his jaw tight. He wouldn't look at me. The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by the distant tick of a grandfather clock in the hall. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. I reached out and my fingers trembled slightly as I touched the edge of the papers. I didn't pick it up. I just rested my hand on it, as if to confirm it was real. "I see," I said, my voice barely a whisper. I had to clear my throat to speak again. "You think I need to sign this?" "It's not about what we think of you, dear," Eleanor said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "It's about prudence, about securing Liam's future, and the family's legacy." The lie was so blatant it almost made me laugh. It was entirely about what they thought of me. My family wasn't wealthy. My parents were teachers. I had a good job as a graphic designer, but I didn't come from money. From their perspective, I was a liability, a risk. Then Eleanor delivered the line that would echo in my mind for weeks. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, as if she were sharing a secret instead of delivering an insult. "We just have to be careful," she said, her eyes flicking from me to Liam and back again. "After all, we wouldn't want anyone to think you're only after his money." The words hung in the air, sharp and poisonous. It was the quietest shout I had ever heard. My face grew hot. Humiliation washed over me in a sickening wave. I felt small, dissected, and labeled a gold digger. That's what they saw when they looked at me. That's all they saw. I pulled my hand back from the document as if it were hot. I finally looked directly at Liam, my expression begging him, daring him to defend me, to say anything. He finally turned to me, his face pale. "Clara," he said, his voice strained. "It's just a piece of paper. It doesn't mean anything about us. It's just how they are. It's a formality." A formality. The word was a slap in the face. My love for him, our entire relationship, our future, all reduced to a formality that needed to be legally contained. My heart, which had been pounding with anxiety, now felt like a heavy, cold stone in my chest. I knew in that moment that this was not just a piece of paper. It was a test. And it wasn't just his parents I had to worry about. It was the man sitting next to me. The man who was letting this happen. I stood up from the table. My legs felt shaky, but I forced myself to stand tall. "I need some air," I said, my voice tight. I didn't look at Richard or Eleanor. I couldn't. I walked out of the dining room, the sound of my own footsteps loud against the hardwood floors. Liam called my name, but I didn't stop. I walked out of their perfect house into the cool night air, and the insult followed me like a shadow. "You're only after his money." The car ride home was suffocatingly quiet. Liam drove, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. I stared out the passenger window, watching the streetlights blur into long, hazy streaks. The city lights had never looked so cold. I felt a chasm opening up between us, wide and deep, and I had no idea how we would ever cross it. When we got back to our apartment, the silence broke. "Clara, please talk to me," Liam said as I walked into the living room. I turned to face him, my arms crossed over my chest. "What do you want me to say, Liam?" I asked. "That it's okay? That it doesn't bother me that your parents think I'm a thief? That you sat there and let them say it?" "They didn't say that," he argued, his voice rising. "They said I was after your money," I shot back. "That's the same thing. And you said it was a formality? A formality, Liam? Is that what I am to you? Is our marriage just a business transaction that needs to be legally managed?" "No, of course not," he exclaimed, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "You're twisting my words. I just meant it's how they operate. They did the same thing when my cousin got married. It's not personal." "It felt personal," I said, my voice cracking. "It felt incredibly personal, Liam. They looked at me like I was something they had to scrape off their shoe. And you just agreed with them." "I didn't agree with them," he insisted. "I was trying to keep the peace. You don't know what they're like when you challenge them. It's better to just go along with it. The paper doesn't change how I feel about you." That was the heart of it. He was more afraid of his parents than he was of hurting me. That realization was a fresh wave of pain. I had always known his parents were controlling, but I believed Liam was his own man. Now I saw him as a boy, still tethered to their expectations, their demands. "It changes how I feel, though," I said softly, the fight draining out of me, replaced by a profound sadness. "It changes everything." I went into our bedroom and closed the door. I could hear him pacing in the living room for a long time. I laid in bed, wide awake, staring at the ceiling. The image of that document on the table was burned into my mind. It was a line in the sand, drawn not by me, but by them. And Liam was standing on the wrong side of it. I loved him. I truly did. But love couldn't be the only thing holding us together, not if respect wasn't there too. The trust I had in him, in us, had been fractured. I didn't know if it could be repaired. The next few days were a blur of strained conversations and forced smiles. Liam acted as if everything could go back to normal if we just didn't talk about it. He would bring me coffee in the morning, kiss my forehead, and talk about wedding plans as if that humiliating dinner had never happened. But it was always there, a ghost in the room with us. The prenup sat on the corner of his desk, a constant, ugly reminder. I tried to explain to him again, more calmly this time. Liam, it's the accusation behind it, I said one evening. It's the fact that they believe I'm capable of that. And it's the fact that you won't defend my character to them. Defending you would just make it worse, he said, his voice laced with an exhaustion I was beginning to resent. It would be a huge fight. They would see it as proof that you're turning me against them. This is just easier, Clara. We sign it, we put it in a drawer, and we never have to think about it again. But I would think about it. I would always think about it. Every time his mother gave me a tight, insincere smile. Every time his father talked about the importance of legacy. I would remember that they saw me as a threat, and I would remember that my own fiancé chose easier over standing up for me. My best friend and maid of honor, Zoe, came over a few days later. I hadn't told her yet, partly because I was embarrassed, and partly because saying it out loud would make it even more real. She took one look at my face and knew something was wrong. "Okay, spill," she said, plopping down on my sofa and pulling her feet up under her. "You have your world is ending face on. What did the outlaws do now?" I took a deep breath and told her everything. The dinner, the document, the exact words Eleanor had used, and Liam's reaction, or lack thereof. Zoe listened patiently, her expression growing darker with every word. When I finished, she was silent for a full minute, her jaw clenched. "Zoe?" I asked tentatively. "I'm going to kill him," she said, her voice dangerously calm. "Then I'm going to kill his parents. Slowly." "Don't say that," I said, though a small part of me appreciated her fierce loyalty. "I am completely serious, Clara," she said, her eyes flashing. "A prenup? Fine. Some rich people are weird like that. But to say you're a gold digger to your face? And for Liam, that spineless jellyfish, to just sit there and let them? No, absolutely not." She stood up and started pacing my living room, her energy a stark contrast to the lethargy that had settled over me. "This is not about money," she said, pointing a finger at me. "This is about control. They are trying to put you in your place before you're even officially in the family. They're telling you that you are worthless without their name and their money." "I know," I whispered. "And Liam is their little puppet," she continued, her voice rising. "He's so terrified of mommy and daddy that he's willing to let them humiliate the woman he's supposed to love. This is a massive, waving, bright red flag, Clara. You see that, right?" I nodded, tears welling in my eyes. "What do I do, Zoe?" She stopped pacing and came to sit next to me, her tone softening. "First, you do not sign that thing," she said firmly. "Not yet. Not until we figure out what's really going on." "What do you mean?" I asked. "It's pretty clear what's going on. They think I'm poor trash." "No, I don't think it's that simple," Zoe said, her eyes narrowing thoughtfully. "People like that, people with that much of a need for control, it's usually because they're hiding something. Their accusation is too specific, too aggressive. It feels like they're trying to create a narrative." "A narrative?" "Yes," she said. "Clara, the gold digger. It's a simple story. It explains why you might get angry. It explains why you might leave. It makes you the bad guy in any scenario where you don't do exactly what they want." A chill went down my spine. What Zoe was saying made a terrifying amount of sense. It wasn't just a random insult, it was a strategy. They were preemptively discrediting me. But why? Why go to such lengths? "So what are you suggesting?" I asked. "I'm suggesting you start paying attention," Zoe said, her voice low and serious. "To everything. The little comments they make, the things they try to hide, how they talk about money when they think you're not listening. There's something else going on here, Clara. I can feel it. And if you're going to marry into this family, you deserve to know exactly what you're getting into." That night, for the first time in days, I felt a flicker of something other than sadness and humiliation. It was a spark of anger, a spark of determination. Zoe was right. This wasn't just an insult I had to swallow, it was a warning. And I was going to find out what it was warning me about. The following weekend, there was a family brunch at Richard and Eleanor's country club. It was an obligation I couldn't get out of without causing a major drama that I wasn't ready for yet. Liam promised his parents wouldn't bring up the prenup. He said they considered the matter settled, assuming I would eventually come around and sign it. I walked into the club feeling like a spy behind enemy lines. I smiled. I made small talk. I complimented Eleanor on her pearl necklace. But underneath the surface, I was watching, listening. I was standing near the buffet table, pretending to deliberate between a croissant and a muffin, when I overheard Eleanor talking to her sister-in-law, a woman named Patricia. Liam's sister, Chloe, was with them, nodding along eagerly. "It's just so important to be diligent," Eleanor was saying in a hushed but firm tone. "You can't be too careful these days. People can be so opportunistic." Patricia murmured something in agreement. Then Chloe, Liam's younger sister, who had always treated me with a kind of veiled condescension, chimed in. "Well, at least you and Dad are being smart about it," she said, casting a quick glance in my direction. I pretended not to notice. You don't want someone coming in and taking what you've all worked so hard to build, especially when Liam is so trusting. The implication was clear. Liam was the trusting fool, and I was the opportunist he had foolishly trusted. But it was Chloe's next comment that snagged my attention. "And after that whole mess with the Austin property," Chloe added with a sigh, "we just can't afford any more financial surprises." Eleanor shot her a sharp look, a silent command to shut up. "Chloe, that's not something we discuss." Chloe's face flushed slightly. "Sorry," she mumbled. "I just mean we have to protect the family's interests." The Austin property. A financial surprise. My mind latched onto the words. I had never heard anything about an Austin property. Liam had never mentioned it. I filed the information away. It was the first piece of a puzzle I didn't even know I was solving. Later that afternoon, I found a moment to speak with Liam's uncle, Robert. He was Richard's younger brother, a much quieter and more approachable man. He was a history professor at a local university and seemed perpetually amused by his family's obsession with wealth and status. He had always been kind to me. "Enjoying the party, Clara?" he asked, stirring his iced tea. "It's lovely, Robert," I said. "I was just admiring the view." We were on a terrace overlooking a pristine golf course. "This place is incredible. Do you and Richard come here often?" "Richard and Eleanor do," he said with a wry smile. "I find it a bit stuffy. Too many people talking about their stock portfolios." I laughed. "I can imagine. Liam mentioned you all have a place at the lake. Do you have other family properties as well?" I think I overheard Chloe mention something about Austin. I tried to make the question sound as casual as possible, like idle curiosity. Robert's expression flickered for a brief second. It was a subtle shift, but I caught it. "Ah, yes. The Austin venture," he said, his voice neutral. He took a sip of his tea. "That was a few years ago. A bit of a misstep, unfortunately." "Oh?" I prompted gently. He looked out at the golf course, avoiding my eyes. "Just a business deal that didn't pan out as expected," he said vaguely. "My brother prefers not to dwell on it." His evasiveness was more telling than any detailed explanation could have been. He was protecting his brother. Or someone else. The family had a secret, a failure they were ashamed of. And it was connected to Austin. That night, Liam and I were getting ready for bed. The tension between us was still there, a low hum beneath every interaction. "Did you have a good time today?" he asked, trying to sound cheerful. "It was fine," I said, pulling a brush through my hair. "Your Uncle Robert is nice." "Yeah, he's the good one," Liam chuckled. I decided to test the waters. "I was chatting with him. He mentioned something about a property in Austin. I didn't know you guys had a place there." Liam froze. He was in the middle of taking off his watch, and his hand just stopped in midair. He slowly placed the watch on his nightstand and turned to me. his face carefully blank. It wasn't a big deal, he said, his voice a little too casual. It was a real estate investment Dad was looking into. It fell through. Oh, I said, watching him closely. Chloe made it sound like it was some kind of mess. She said the family couldn't afford any more financial surprises. Liam's jaw tightened. Chloe talks too much, he muttered. She doesn't know the whole story. It was nothing, Clara, just a bad investment. Dad lost a bit of money, that's all. It's in the past. He was lying. I could see it in the way he wouldn't meet my gaze, in the defensive set of his shoulders. It wasn't his dad's investment, or at least not just his dad's. His reaction was too personal, too visceral. I didn't push it any further that night. But I knew I was on to something. The prenup, the gold digger accusation, and the secret of the Austin mess were all connected somehow. They weren't just protecting their assets from a hypothetical future threat. They were actively hiding a past failure. And I was starting to suspect that Liam was at the very center of it. My nights became sleepless. I would lie next to Liam, listening to the sound of his steady breathing, and wonder who he really was. The man I loved, the funny, charming, kind man I had agreed to marry, seemed to be fading away, replaced by a stranger who kept secrets and chose his parents over me. My work began to suffer. I stared at my computer screen for hours, unable to focus on the designs I was supposed to be creating. My boss, a kind woman named Sarah, called me into her office. "Is everything okay, Clara?" she asked gently. "Your work has been top-notch until this past week. You seem distracted." I almost broke down and told her everything, but I couldn't. It was too personal, too messy. "I'm just dealing with some wedding planning stress," I said, forcing a smile. "It's a little overwhelming." She nodded sympathetically. "I get it. Take a mental health day if you need it. Don't burn yourself out before the big day." I thanked her and went back to my desk, feeling more alone than ever. That evening, I called Zoe. "I found something," I said, my voice low. I told her about the conversation I'd overheard and Liam's reaction when I asked him about Austin. "I knew it," Zoe said, her voice buzzing with a kind of grim excitement. "There's a skeleton in their closet, and it's wearing a cowboy hat. We need to find out what happened in Austin." "How?" I asked, feeling helpless. "Liam won't tell me. His family is a fortress." "We live in the digital age, my friend," Zoe said. "People leave trails, public records, social media, news articles. We just have to start digging." So we did. That night, after Liam fell asleep, I crept out of bed and opened my laptop. Zoe was on the phone, guiding me. We started with simple searches. Richard, last name, Austin, Texas. Eleanor, last name, real estate Austin. For hours, we found nothing. Just articles about Richard's successful business, society photos of Eleanor at charity galas. It was a carefully curated public image of perfection and wealth. "This is getting us nowhere," I sighed, rubbing my tired eyes. "They've covered their tracks." "Don't give up," Zoe urged. "Let's try a different angle. What about Liam? Let's search for him." I typed Liam's full name and Austin into the search bar. The results were mostly just his social media profiles, which were private. Then I scrolled down to the third page of results. And there it was. A small article from a local Austin business journal dated 3 years ago. The headline was innocuous. "New tech incubator InnovateX launches with promising local talent." I clicked on it. The article was about a new startup hub. It listed the founders of the flagship company that the incubator was supporting. My breath caught in my throat. The lead founder was listed as Liam. My Liam. "Zoe," I whispered. "I found something. He started a company, a tech company in Austin." "What?" she said, surprised. "He never mentioned that. He told you he's always worked for his dad." "I know," I said, my mind racing as I scanned the article. It was full of optimistic quotes from a younger-looking Liam, talking about disrupting the market and changing the paradigm. He was pictured with his two co-founders, all of them grinning, full of hope and ambition. Okay, this is weird, Zoe said. Why would he hide this? Unless it failed. I finished for her. My fingers flew across the keyboard. I searched for InnovateX Austin. The first few results were from around the same time as the launch article. But then, about a year later, the tone of the articles changed. InnovateX struggles to secure second-round funding. Co-founder departs Austin startup. And finally, the nail in the coffin. An article from a tech blog titled, "The InnovateX Implosion: How a Promising Austin Startup Burned Through Millions in a Year." I felt sick. The article was a brutal post-mortem. It detailed mismanagement, lavish and unnecessary spending, and a failure to produce a viable product. It quoted anonymous former employees who described the leadership as arrogant and out of their depth. It mentioned that the company had folded, leaving investors with a total loss. And at the bottom of the article, there was a single, devastating sentence. Lead founder Liam, last name, son of industrialist Richard, last name, could not be reached for comment. Sources close to the company estimate the total losses to be in the low seven figures. 7 figures, millions of dollars. Gone. I leaned back in my chair, my heart pounding. This was the Austin mess. This was the financial surprise. It wasn't his father's bad investment. It was Liam's. He had started a company, burned through a fortune, and it had collapsed in a spectacular public failure. And he had never told me. He had lied to my face, telling me it was nothing. "Clara, are you there?" Zoe's voice came through the phone, sounding distant. "He lost millions of dollars," I said, my voice numb. "His company imploded. It's all here, Zoe. He failed." Miserably. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Oh, Liam," Zoe said softly. "You stupid, stupid man." "Why would he hide this from me?" I asked, the question hanging in the air. "Shame," Zoe answered immediately. "Embarrassment. But it's more than that. It's his parents. Can you imagine how Richard and Eleanor reacted to this? Their perfect son, the heir to their empire, failing so publicly, wasting so much money? I thought of their pristine house, their obsession with legacy and success. A failure of this magnitude would be more than just a financial loss. It would be a deep, personal humiliation for them. "So the money he lost?" I began, my mind starting to connect the dots. "Where did it come from?" "It had to be family money," Zoe said. "Either his dad gave it to him, or he got it from the family business, which means he's indebted to them," I said, the final piece clicking into place. Deeply indebted. Suddenly, everything made a horrible kind of sense. The prenup wasn't about protecting Liam's future wealth from me. It was about protecting the family's remaining wealth from his past failures. They weren't worried about me taking their money. They were worried that I would find out their son was a financial black hole. They were terrified that I might become another one of his liabilities, another person they might have to bail out. The gold digger accusation wasn't just an insult. It was a shield. It was a way to control the narrative, to paint me as the greedy one, to distract from the real financial risk in the family. Their own son. If I ever discovered the truth and got angry, they had already framed me as being unreasonable and money-obsessed. It was a perfect diabolical piece of emotional and financial manipulation. I felt a surge of cold, hard anger. They had humiliated me, insulted me, and tried to make me feel worthless, all to cover up their son's incompetence and their own family shame. And Liam had let them. He was a willing participant in the lie. He had chosen to deceive me to protect his own fragile ego and his parents' reputation. "Clara, what are you going to do?" Zoe asked, her voice cautious. I closed my laptop. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the dark, sleeping city. The sadness and confusion I had been feeling for weeks had finally burned away, leaving behind something solid and sharp. Resolve. "I'm not going to do anything," I said, my voice steady. Not yet. They think they have all the power. They think I'm just some naive girl they can push around. They're wrong. I was no longer just the hurt fiancé. I was a woman who had been lied to, manipulated, and underestimated. And I was done being a victim in their carefully constructed story. I was going to write my own ending. The next morning, I woke up before Liam. I moved around the apartment with a newfound sense of purpose. When he came into the kitchen, I had coffee ready. I smiled at him. It was a different kind of smile than the ones I had been forcing for the past week. This one was calm, confident. It seemed to unnerve him. "You're in a good mood," he said, watching me. "I did a lot of thinking last night," I said, sipping my coffee. "About us. About the prenup." He looked hopeful. And? "And I've decided you're right," I said. His face broke into a relieved grin. "Really? Oh, Clara, that's great. I told you it wasn't a big deal. We can sign it and move on." "I agree," I said smoothly. "Let's move on. But first, I want to understand it. I feel silly not knowing more about our financial future, you know? It feels childish. So I want you to walk me through it. All of it." His smile faltered slightly. "Walk you through it? It's just legal stuff, Clara. It's boring." "Humor me," I said, my smile unwavering. "I want to be a partner in this marriage, Liam. A real partner. And that means understanding the full picture. Your assets, your debts, everything. So when we sign that paper, I know exactly what it is I'm agreeing to." I was using their own logic against them. If this was about being prudent and practical, then the most prudent thing I could do was demand full transparency. I had him trapped. He couldn't refuse without revealing that he had something to hide. He hesitated. "My debts? I don't really have any debts." The lie was so bald-faced, so effortless, that it took my breath away. He was going to stick to the story, no matter what. "Oh, good," I said, my voice bright and cheerful. "Then this should be a very short conversation. Let's sit down tonight. You can show me your investment portfolio, your bank statements, your credit report. You know, just so I can get a handle on things. For my own peace of mind." The color drained from his face. He looked like a cornered animal. "My credit report? Clara, that's really personal." "We're getting married, Liam," I said, my voice losing its cheerful edge and becoming firm. "It's about to get a lot more personal than that. If you want me to sign a document that treats our marriage like a business deal, then I'm going to need to see the books." He stared at me, his mind clearly racing, trying to find a way out. But there was no way out. He had built this cage himself, with his lies and his weakness. Now, I was simply rattling the bars. That evening was a masterclass in evasion. Liam sat me down at the dining table, a folder of papers in front of him. He showed me a statement for a mutual fund his parents had started for him when he was a child. He showed me the deed to a small condo he owned, which I already knew about. "See?" he said, spreading the papers out. "It's all pretty straightforward." "This is great," I said, looking through the documents. "But it doesn't seem like a complete picture. What about your income from your job at your father's company? And you said you have no debts, so can I see your credit report? It should be easy to pull up online." "I don't see why that's necessary," he said, his voice tight. "Clara, this feels like an interrogation." "This feels like due diligence," I countered, my voice calm. "Your parents are demanding that I prove I'm not a financial risk to you. I'm simply asking you to do the same for me." The accusation hung in the air between us. He was the risk. We both knew it, but he couldn't admit it. "I don't have time for this tonight," he said, standing up abruptly. "I have an early meeting tomorrow." He was running away. It was all the confirmation I needed. He was terrified of me seeing the truth in black and white. "Okay, Liam," I said softly. I didn't push him. I had planted the seed. Now I just had to wait. But I wasn't just going to wait. I needed more than just a failed company article. I needed concrete proof of the debt. The kind of proof that couldn't be denied or explained away. I needed something that would blow their whole narrative apart. My chance came in an unexpected way. A few days later, Eleanor called me. Her voice was syrupy sweet. "Clara, dear, I'm having some old family things moved out of the attic. There are a few boxes of Liam's old things from his college days. I thought you might like to go through them before we put them in storage. There might be some sentimental treasures in there." It was a setup. I knew it instantly. She was trying to draw me back into the family fold, to make me feel included, to smooth things over so I would sign the papers. Or maybe she was testing me, seeing if I would take the bait. "That's so thoughtful of you, Eleanor," I said. "I'd love to." I went to their house that Saturday. Eleanor led me up to the dusty, sprawling attic. There were indeed several boxes with Liam scrawled on the side in marker. "I'll leave you to it," she said with a bright smile. "Take your time. Call me if you need anything." I waited until I heard her footsteps fade down the stairs. Then I started to search. But I wasn't looking for college photo albums or old trophies. I was looking for something else. I knew it was a long shot. But desperate people and people covering up a massive failure can be careless. I went through 2 boxes of old textbooks and clothes. Nothing. I was starting to feel foolish, like I had walked right into her trap and found nothing but dust. Then I opened the 3rd box. It was filled with old financial documents, college loan statements, early credit card offers. It seemed to be his financial life box. I sifted through the papers, my heart starting to beat faster. And then I found it. It wasn't in the box itself. It had slipped down between the box and the wall, as if it had been dropped or hastily hidden. It was a thick manila envelope with the name of Richard's company in the return address corner. It was addressed to Liam at our apartment, but it had been opened. It must have been sent here by mistake. Or perhaps Liam had brought it here to discuss with his parents. My hands trembled as I opened the flap. Inside was not a single document, but a series of them. The first was a formal loan agreement between Liam and his father's company, Last Name Industries. The amount made me gasp. It was for $2 million. The date on the agreement was from just before he started InnovateX. The next pages were even more damning. They were payment schedules and letters about missed payments. "Your account is currently 60 days past due. We must insist upon immediate payment to bring your account current. Failure to adhere to the revised payment plan will result in..." The language was cold, corporate, and ruthless. This wasn't a father helping his son. This was a creditor closing in on a debtor. The final document was a promissory note, signed by Liam. He had essentially signed away a huge portion of his future salary from the family company to pay back the loan. He wasn't an executive in training, earning a generous salary. He was an indentured servant working to pay off an astronomical debt to his own father. His salary was a fiction. Most of it was likely going straight back to Richard's company. This was it. The smoking gun. The undeniable proof. It laid the entire conspiracy bare. The secrecy, the lies, the prenup, the gold digger insult. It was all designed to hide this single, shameful fact. Their son was a failure who owed them millions of dollars. They were terrified I would find out and leave him, or worse, that our joint finances would somehow put their company at risk when he inevitably defaulted again. I quickly took out my phone and photographed every single page of the documents. I made sure the images were clear and legible. Then I carefully placed the papers back in the envelope and slid it back into the crack between the box and the wall, exactly where I had found it. I took a few old photos from one of the boxes to make it look like my trip to the attic had been a success. I went downstairs, a beatific smile on my face. "Oh, Eleanor, thank you so much," I said, holding up a picture of a college-aged Liam with a terrible haircut. "I found some real treasures." She beamed at me, completely unaware that I had just found the key to her family's biggest secret. She thought she was manipulating me. She had no idea that she had just handed me all the ammunition I would ever need. I walked out of that house feeling a strange sense of calm. The game had changed. I was no longer on the defensive. I had the truth on my side, and I had the proof to back it up. The question was no longer what I was going to do. The question was when and how I was going to use it. The week of the wedding arrived like a slowly approaching storm. The air was thick with unspoken things. Liam was walking on eggshells around me, alternating between being overly affectionate and sullenly silent. He knew I hadn't signed the prenup, but he was too afraid to bring it up again. He was hoping I would just forget or give in. His parents, on the other hand, were becoming more brazen. At a family dinner a few nights before the rehearsal, Richard cornered me by the fireplace. "Clara," he said, his voice low and intimidating. "That document is still sitting on Liam's desk. The wedding is on Saturday. I expect this matter to be resolved before then." It wasn't a request. It was an order. "I'm still thinking about it, Richard," I said, my voice even. "There's nothing to think about," he countered, his eyes hard as stone. "You either sign it and become a part of this family or you don't. The choice is simple." He was trying to bully me. The old me would have been terrified. The new me just felt a cold, clear anger. "You're right," I said, looking him directly in the eye. "The choice is becoming simpler every day." I walked away, leaving him standing there, his face a mask of controlled fury. The day of the rehearsal dinner arrived. It was being held in a private room at an upscale restaurant. The room was filled with flowers and candlelight. It was supposed to be a celebration of love and the joining of two families. To me, it felt like a stage, perfectly set for the final act of a very ugly play. I had the photos of the loan documents saved in a secure folder on my phone. I had also emailed them to Zoe with a simple instruction. "If something happens to me, release the Kraken." She had replied with a single purple devil emoji. Her loyalty was my armor. I wore a simple, elegant red dress. It was a color of confidence, of power. When I walked in, Eleanor's eyes swept over me, and I saw a flicker of disapproval. The bride-to-be was supposed to look soft, virginal. I looked like I was ready for a fight. Liam met me at the door. "You look beautiful," he said, but his eyes were full of anxiety. "Can we just have a nice night? No drama?" "That's up to your parents, Youre, isn't it?" I replied, my voice cool. We took our seats at the head table. I was seated between Liam and Eleanor. Richard was on Liam's other side. Zoe was across from me, and she gave me a subtle, determined nod. The dinner began. The small talk was excruciating. I could feel Eleanor's hostility radiating off her like a cold draft. She made little passive-aggressive comments throughout the meal. "Clara, you're so lucky you don't have to worry about these things. My florist is just a nightmare." "Oh, this wine is exquisite. It's from a vineyard Richard is thinking of investing in. It's so important to have good investments." Every comment was a jab, a reminder of my supposed lower status. I just smiled and nodded, letting her words fall flat. I was saving my energy. Finally, after the main course, Richard stood up to give a toast. He raised his glass. "To Liam and Clara," he began, his voice booming through the small room. "We are so thrilled to be welcoming Clara into our family. A family that, as you all know, has a long history of strength, integrity, and success." He paused, letting his words sink in. He looked right at me. "It is a legacy we take very seriously, and we are confident that Liam has chosen a partner who understands the importance of protecting that legacy. We have taken steps, as any prudent family would, to ensure that legacy remains secure for generations to come." It was a public announcement. He was telling the whole room in coded language that they had me under control, that the prenup was a done deal. He was trying to box me in, to humiliate me into submission. My hands were shaking under the table. This was it. This was the moment. Liam looked mortified. He stared down at his plate, his face beet red. He was ashamed, but his shame still wasn't enough to make him speak up. Richard sat down to polite applause. Eleanor was beaming. She had won. Then Zoe stood up. She picked up her glass of water. I'd like to make a toast as well, she said, her voice clear and strong, cutting through the chatter. All eyes turned to her. Eleanor looked annoyed at the interruption. To family, Zoe said, her eyes fixed on Richard and Eleanor. And to secrets. Because every family has them, don't they? A nervous titter went through the room. Richard's smile tightened. And a toast to practicality, Zoe continued, her voice getting louder. She turned her gaze to Liam. And to protecting family assets. Especially, she said, her voice dropping dramatically, from within the family. The room went dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Eleanor's face had gone from smug to furious. What is the meaning of this? She hissed. What are you implying? Oh, I'm not implying anything, Zoe said with a sweet, dangerous smile. I'm just curious. Liam, why don't you tell us all about your business venture in Austin? I hear it was a real barn burner. Liam went white as a sheet. He looked like he was going to be sick. Richard half rose from his seat, his face purple with rage. That is enough, he roared. Zoe just looked at him. Is it? She asked softly. And then it happened. In a move so theatrical and so perfect I could have kissed her, Zoe tripped. She stumbled forward, her arm lurching out. Her full glass of red wine sailed through the air in a perfect arc and splashed directly onto the front of Eleanor's pristine cream-colored silk dress. Eleanor shrieked. Chaos erupted. People jumped up. Waiters rushed over with napkins. Eleanor was dabbing furiously at the enormous red stain, screeching about her ruined dress. Richard was yelling at Zoe, who was looking utterly, comically apologetic. Oh my gosh, I am so sorry, Eleanor. I'm just so clumsy. It was the perfect diversion. All eyes were on the mess, on the drama of the stained dress. And in that moment of chaos, I stood up. My voice wasn't loud, but it was clear and steady, and it cut through the noise. She's right. Everyone froze. Even Eleanor stopped dabbing at her dress. They all turned to look at me. Liam looked at me, his eyes wide with terror. Zoe is right, I repeated, looking around the room at the confused faces of our friends and family. Then I turned my gaze to Richard and Eleanor. Perhaps we should talk about the real reason for the prenup. There is nothing to talk about, Richard snarled. This is inappropriate. Is it? I asked. I looked at Liam, my heart a cold, hard stone. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Is it inappropriate to talk about the $2 million loan you took from your father's company, Liam? The one you used to fund a business that you ran into the ground? A collective gasp went through the room. Liam flinched as if I had physically struck him. Is it inappropriate to mention that you've missed payments? I continued, my voice unwavering. Or that you signed a promissory note that makes you little more than an indentured servant to your own father? Working to pay off a debt you've been hiding from me since the day we met? Eleanor looked like she was going to faint. Her hand went to her pearls, her mouth hanging open. The red wine stain on her dress seemed to bloom, a scarlet letter of her own making. This is slander, Richard bellowed, but his voice lacked conviction. He looked shaken. The guests were murmuring, their eyes darting between me, Liam, and his parents. The carefully constructed facade of the perfect, powerful family was crumbling before their very eyes. Is it slander, Richard? I asked, my voice dangerously soft. I pulled out my phone. I didn't even have to unlock it. I just held up the black screen. Because I have photos of the loan agreement. And the default notices, and the promissory note that Liam signed. I have the proof. That was the final blow. The checkmate. Richard stared at my phone as if it were a snake. The fight went out of him completely. He sank back into his chair, looking 10 years older. I finally turned my full attention to Liam. He was staring at me, his face a mess of shame, fear, and a bizarre sort of relief. The secret was out. He didn't have to carry it anymore. You let them call me a gold digger, I said to him, my voice trembling with the force of my heartbreak and my anger. You let them humiliate me and question my character. You made me feel worthless. All to hide this. To hide your failure. You weren't protecting your money from me, Liam. You were protecting your fragile ego. Tears were streaming down his face now. Clara, I'm sorry, he whispered. I was going to tell you. When? I asked, my voice raw. After I signed the prenup that would have left me with nothing when you finally defaulted on this loan? After I was legally bound to your family's lies? He had no answer. He just sat there, broken. I looked around the silent, stunned room. I saw pity in some faces, shock in others. In Uncle Robert's eyes, I saw a quiet, sad approval. I took a deep breath. I was done. The wedding, I announced to the room, is off. I looked down at Liam one last time. I slipped the engagement ring off my finger. It felt surprisingly light. I placed it on the table next to his untouched plate of food. It clinked softly against the china. I think this belongs to your father, I said. It was probably just another loan. Then I turned and walked out of the room. Zoe was right behind me. As the door swung shut, I could hear the eruption of voices, the beginning of the fallout. But it was their noise now, not mine. I walked out into the cool night air, leaving the wreckage of their lies behind me. I had never felt so free. The days that followed were a strange mixture of chaos and calm. My phone was bombarded with texts and calls from Liam. They were a pathetic mix of desperate apologies, angry accusations, and pitiful begging. How could you do that to me? One text read. It was followed minutes later by, I love you, please, we can fix this. I didn't reply to a single one. I blocked his number. I blocked his parents. I blocked Chloe. I erected a digital wall around myself, and it was wonderfully quiet. Zoe, my hero, my champion, stayed with me for 2 days. We ordered pizza, drank cheap wine, and rehashed the rehearsal dinner a dozen times, each time with more triumphant laughter. His face when you mentioned the $2 million. She cackled, wiping a tear of mirth from her eye. I thought his head was going to pop off like a champagne cork. And your wine toss, I laughed. It was a work of art. Meryl Streep couldn't have done it better. Eleanor had it coming, she said with a shrug, taking a large bite of pizza. That was for every snide comment, every backhanded compliment, every time she looked at you like you were dirt. I have never been so happy to ruin a $5,000 dress in my entire life. Amidst the victory celebration, a call came through from a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. Hello? I said cautiously. Clara, it's Robert, Liam's uncle. My guard went up immediately. Robert, if this is about Liam, it's not. He interrupted quickly. Well, not directly. I'm not calling to defend him. I wanted to say, I'm sorry for my family's behavior. And for what it's worth, you did the right thing. I was taken aback. Thank you, I said, genuinely surprised. That means a lot. My brother, Richard, he continued with a heavy sigh. He has a sickness. This obsession with image, with the appearance of success. It's poisoned everything he touches. He did the same thing to me years ago when my academic career wasn't prestigious enough for him. He tried to control me with money, too. I chose to walk away. I'm glad you did, too. What happened after I left? I asked, my curiosity getting the better of me. He chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. It was a bloodbath. Richard and Eleanor tried to salvage the situation, to tell people you were unstable, a liar. But you had been too specific. The $2 million loan was a detail you couldn't have just invented. The story fell apart. People started leaving. The whole evening disintegrated. I've heard from my sister Patricia that the family is in shambles. No one knows what to believe, except that Richard and Eleanor were hiding something big. And Liam? I asked, my voice soft. He's a mess, Robert said bluntly. but he needs to be. He's been living in his father's shadow, under his father's thumb, for his entire life. This was a necessary explosion. Maybe now he'll finally have a chance to grow up. Or maybe not. But either way, it's not your problem anymore. No, I agreed, a sense of finality settling over me. It's not. You're a strong woman, Clara, he said before hanging up. Don't let them make you doubt that for a second. His call was a balm. It was validation from inside the fortress, a confirmation that I wasn't crazy, that I hadn't overreacted. I had simply reacted to the truth. A week later, I was packing up my things from the apartment I had shared with Liam. He had agreed to move out and stay with his parents, a regression that was both sad and fitting. I was sorting through a drawer of my clothes when I found the box with the engagement ring. I had forgotten I had even taken it. I opened the velvet case and looked at the diamond. It was large and brilliant and utterly cold. It represented a future that was a lie, a love that was conditional. An idea sparked in my mind. I took the ring, along with a few other pieces of jewelry Liam had given me, to a reputable jeweler downtown. Can I help you? The man behind the counter asked. I'd like to sell these, I said, laying the ring and a pair of earrings on the velvet pad. He examined them with a loupe, his face impassive. After a few minutes, he looked up and named a price. It was a significant amount of money, enough for a fresh start. I'll take it, I said without hesitation. I walked out of that jewelry store with a check in my pocket and a feeling of lightness I hadn't experienced in months. The money wasn't a victory prize. It was severance. It was the closing of a painful chapter and the funding for a new one. I used it as a down payment on a small, sunny apartment in a part of town I had always loved. It was all mine. No ghosts, no lies, no suffocating expectations. The final loose end was the wedding vendors. I spent a day calling the caterer, the florist, the venue, explaining that the wedding was canceled. Most were understanding, though I lost a few deposits. When I called the photographer, a woman named Jenna, she was incredibly sympathetic. Oh, honey, I'm so sorry to hear that, she said. Let me guess. Groom got cold feet? Something like that, I said, not wanting to get into the messy details. His family was difficult. I get it, she said. You wouldn't believe the stories I could tell you. Well, your deposit is non-refundable, but I'll tell you what. I'll credit it to you for a future session, a family portrait, a headshot, anything. Or, she paused. You could use it for a divorce session. We could go somewhere beautiful and you could ceremonially burn your wedding dress. I laughed. A real, genuine laugh. You know what? I think I'll just take some new headshots for my portfolio. You got it, she said. A new start. A new start. That's exactly what it was. Months passed. The seasons changed. I settled into my new apartment and my new life. I excelled at work, free from the constant emotional drain of my previous relationship. I spent my weekends with Zoe and my other friends, hiking, trying new restaurants, and just enjoying the simple, uncomplicated peace of my own company. I never heard from Liam or his family again. Through the grapevine of mutual acquaintances, I heard bits and pieces. I heard that Liam had officially quit his father's company and was now working some low-level sales job, trying to make it on his own. I heard that Richard and Eleanor had become social pariahs, their reputation for integrity shattered. They had been exposed as manipulative and deceitful, and in their small, gossipy social circle, that was a death sentence. One afternoon, I was walking down the street near my old apartment when I saw him. Liam. He was coming out of a coffee shop. He looked thinner and tired. He hadn't seen me. I could have kept walking, ducked into a store, avoided him completely. But I didn't. I just stood there and waited. He looked up and our eyes met. He froze, a deer in the headlights. The bustling city street seemed to fade away. Clara, he said, his voice hoarse. Liam, I replied, my tone neutral. He took a hesitant step toward me. I'm I'm so sorry, he said, the words sounding worn out from overuse. For everything, I was a coward. Yes, I said. You were. There was no anger in my voice anymore, just a simple statement of fact. The fire had burned out, leaving behind only the cold ashes of what used to be. I miss you, he whispered, his eyes pleading. I looked at him, really looked at him. I saw the boy who was afraid of his parents, the man who couldn't face his own failures, the person who had been willing to let me be collateral damage in his family's war with the truth. I felt a flicker of pity for him, but nothing more. The love was gone. It had been replaced by a hard-won sense of self-preservation. I know, I said. And it was the kindest thing I could offer him. It was an acknowledgement of his pain, but not an invitation to share it. I gave him a small final nod, and then I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. There was nothing left for me there. They had tried to write a story for me, one where I was the villain, the greedy outsider. They thought their money and their power gave them the right to define me. But they had underestimated me. They didn't realize that my character wasn't for sale, and my self-respect didn't have a price tag. They called me a gold digger because they were terrified I'd discover their family fortune was built on a foundation of lies. In the end, I walked away from their tarnished gold and their mountain of debt. I walked away with the only thing that had ever truly been mine to begin with: my integrity. They were left with their secrets, their shame, and a very, very expensive dry cleaning bill. And me? I was finally, completely, gloriously free.